All right, the Super Bowl party and celebration here in Philadelphia is officially over, and it is time to turn the page to the 2025-2026 season. And when you win the Super Bowl, when you make the Super Bowl, whatever you want to say, this comes a little bit quicker than usual. So we're getting right into it today. A new, I guess, kind of episode or show under the our Beef Up Front umbrella here at Fox Sports The Gambler. We are introducing our new show, Bending the Edge with Beef and Lettuce, hosted by Ryan Coyle and Nick McClay, where over the next few weeks, we'll be doing a bit of a deep dive on some of the top prospects at all the important positions. And then as we get closer to the draft, post combine, get into April, do some more rankings, do some mock drafts, and try and hit on just about everything important in the draft. The Eagles picking 32 this year, so you're going to have to get into the weeds a little bit more on some of these prospects. But Nick, welcome. How are we? It's excited to get into this little series with you going forward and break down the quarterbacks today.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Now that the season's over, we got the offseason to look forward to. Ton of holes for a ton of teams, a lot of changes, a lot of moving pieces between all these teams, especially the lesser teams. They're going to be changing a lot. Going into it now, we're talking about quarterbacks, one of the weaker classes that we have seen. So I'm interested to see how the top of the board shakes out, what teams really value quarterbacks in or going forward into this season, and what teams really would rather go into free agency. So I'm very excited to see how this all plays out before the draft and the combine and the pro days and all that stuff.
Yeah, so you kind of touched on it, where this is really regarded kind of as a weak quarterback class, a weaker quarterback class. I mean, when you look at some of the teams at the top here, whether it's the Browns, whether it's the Titans, whether it's the Giants, a lot of these teams are in the market for a quarterback. So do you think this is a draft where, it's worth taking a swing on some of these guys, even if they don't look like, home run type prospects like in the past few years, whether it's been Caleb Williams has been really praised, back a few years, Trevor Lawrence, guys like that. There's not one of those top tier kind of quarterback prospects. Do you think it's worth it before we start diving into it to potentially take a risk on one of these top guys? Or would you look more so to get like a bridge type quarterback, go get a veteran, whether it's an Aaron Rodgers, say Joe Flacco, someone like that, just for example, and put you in position to get a higher pick next year with one of these young quarterbacks, whether it's Nico or Arch Manning? It's looking like the next year's class is going to be a lot stronger.
Yeah, I think I personally would lean towards the free agency route and head for a bridge type of a quarterback rather than hit this quarterback class coming into the year. I think, like you said, next year's class is very strong with Nico and Arch. I mean, there's plenty of guys that are coming out that can make a difference in next year's class rather than this year, like the Titans and the Browns. Like, they're players in this draft. Like, I think Abdul Carter is a generational player. I think he can change a complete defense. Me personally, I think I would take him if I'm Tennessee and have that bridge guy. And I know Will Levis hasn't really done much, but maybe you can get a bridge guy, see how Will Levis develops under, say, like you said, a Flacco or Rodgers. But yeah, I think I'd rather lean towards the bridge option and go for next year's draft if it were up to me.
Yeah, and it's really, interesting kind of spot because you don't know if you're going to be picking, this high again, number one. So do you kind of take that risk? Do you take that chance on the quarterback if you're the Titans or the Browns? And that's why those guys get paid the big bucks. That's why, they have the discussions and go through all this and the extensive research, and I'm sure they'll come to a conclusion. But a real interesting kind of debate, because also who knows if the Titans do really believe in Cam Ward, do really believe in Shedeur Sanders, and they're not even considering anything else at this point. There's a lot to go into it. February 19th, the draft, a little bit under 2 months away. So I'm sure we'll hear everything and anything in between now and then. But the guy I want to start with at the top is Cam Ward. I think consensus, and we talk about it with Mark all the time, like the draft boards this year, there doesn't really seem to be a consensus like overall. But I think if you looked at 8 or 10 big boards in terms of quarterback rankings, 8 or 9 of them probably have Cam Ward at the top. The senior out of Miami, 6'2", 223 pounds, Played 2 years at the FCS level at Incarnate Word, then went 2 years up to Washington State, and played this last year at Miami. Was one of the best quarterbacks in the country this year. A little over 4,300 passing yards, 39 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 67.2% completion percentage, 204 rushing yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns. Nick, just tell me kind of what you like about him, what you don't like about him, and how he projects to the next level.
Yeah, I think he's got pretty like one of the best arm talents in this draft. Great velocity on all his throws. He's very smooth in the pocket, great pocket awareness. He escapes a lot of stuff that you think the play's dead. And then all you see him is just coming out, escape the pocket, great poise in the pocket. He always seems under cool, calm, collected, good body, good frame. He's a good athlete. He can change speeds. He's got good touch, good power. He does make a lot of those head scratching decisions where you're like, there was nothing there. What are you doing? Why are you forcing that pass? I think you do get in an NFL system. You get under an NFL scheme that can limit him. I think that will only make him better. He's very fundamental arm talent, has the experience, like you said, 2 years at Incarnate Word, 2 years at Washington State. He can get stuck on his first reads a lot. And once that happens, he can't really get off of it. That's where he tends to kind of run out of the pocket too early, then leads to a lot of those head-scratching plays. He had 10 games over 300 passing yards and 9 games of 3 or more passing touchdowns. So the production is there. ACC Player of the Year, All-American. I think he kind of reminds me of like a shorter Jordan Love with his motion and his mechanics and his ability to escape the pocket. I think his combination of his arm and his size, his willingness to do whatever, he really will just let it fly. I think he'll be an okay starter in the league. I don't think he'll really change or overcome like a lot of these teams or change a lot of these offenses, but I think he'll be a productive NFL quarterback.
Yeah, the thing with Cam Ward that really stuck out to me watching, I was a big Miami backer this year. I thought he was the quarterback that could take him to new heights, and he did for what we've seen out of Miami in recent years. Obviously they fall short. Terrible defense, but he had that kind of ability to put the team on his back a lot of times and will them to victories, scoring in the 40s, the high 30s a lot of times. The thing though that stuck out to me the most about him, and you touched on, it's like he always seemed like calm, cool, and collected, but like at times a little bit too much. It seemed like a little too casual. I feel like that's something that at the NFL level is something that I'll probably get coached out of him, trying to play more kind of in structure, but you don't want to take away that ability to make those second reaction type of plays. But if you are the Titans, would you feel comfortable taking him and taking the risk on him as the guy there at number 1?
I think they will end up doing it just because of their quarterback production in the last few years. They really haven't done anything with Levis. I think I would go Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, whatever you think, whatever their GM thinks is that generational talent. But I do think that the decision will be Cam Ward just based off what the Titans need in that offensive system. I think they've kind of run that Will Levis train as far as they really want it to. So yeah, I think they do go Cam Ward. If I were in control, I think I would go Carter.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the kind of main debate as we get to April, whether it's Cam Ward or Carter, or potentially the next guy we'll touch on with Shedeur Sanders. And obviously, the big thing with him is with Deion, and we've already heard the rumors, the murmurs, whatever you want to call them, that he's going to have a lot of say in where he goes. Like, I can't see the Browns being like Deion being like, yeah, we're good with my son going to the Browns. I could definitely see him steering his direction to whether it's the Giants, whether it's the Raiders, a lot of quarterback needy teams here at the top. But Shedeur Sanders, another guy, it's pretty rare. I mean, I don't think I can ever remember it, but probably the 2 top quarterback prospects, both being former FCS guys and then transferring up. Obviously, Shedeur's story a little bit different, just playing for his father, but winds up transferring to Colorado, coming out as a senior this year, 6'2", 215 pounds. Not anywhere near the athlete as his father. When you think Sanders, you probably think of more of an athletic guy, more speed, but he's as pocket passer as it gets, it seems like. 2024 stats include 4,100 passing yards, 37 passing touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 74% completion percentage. I think you can make an argument that he's the most accurate quarterback in this entire draft class. 4 rushing touchdowns as well. Finished with negative rushing yards. That is just a product of playing behind the Colorado offensive line. You got to keep in mind in college they take rushing yards off for sacks. So, Nick, do you think it's a close debate between Sanders and Ward at 1? And if you have a personal preference, who would you take between the two?
Yeah, I think it's a lot closer than kind of people are saying. I do think it's a little 1A, 1B. They're not their games aren't very like or they are similar, but at the same time they're very different. Like you said, Sanders is probably the most accurate quarterback in this draft, while Shador just lets it fly. He does have the elite ball placement, but his timing is very off. That does come with having a terrible offensive line. He can make he can make quicker decisions. He holds on to the ball a lot, takes bad sacks when he needs to throw it away. But when he is protected, he's very good in the pocket. When he has time, like I guess most quarterbacks are with a well protected pocket, it's easier to make decisions. He's been in those tough competitive games where he's been clutch. He offers some value as a scrambler. Like you said, he's not the most athletic as you would think as a Sanders or Sanders' son, but he does have that athletic ability to escape the pocket and make plays. Yeah, like you said, 2 years at Jackson State where he put up just under 7,000 yards and 70 touchdowns in 2 years. And then he in Colorado in 2 years, 7,300 yards, 64 passing touchdowns with 8 rushing touchdowns. So the production is there. He was Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, had 7 games with 300 or more passing yards and 7 games with 3 or more passing touchdowns. So I think you give him a clean pocket. I think he can make some things happen, but his timing definitely needs to improve, and his game. And I think that will improve once he gets under an NFL scheme.
Yeah, it's one of those things like where Sam Darnold said before, like seeing ghosts. Like you feel like watching him that he was just so used to getting pressured. Sometimes he just fled the pocket without even being pressured or whatnot. And as you said, that's something that a better surrounding cast, better supporting system in front of him on the offensive line, and obviously play with a great receiver. Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn was a good receiver. But, everything gets thrown off when you don't have a clean offensive line. And 2 years ago, they were terrible. They gave up, I believe, the most sacks in the country. Last year, were definitely better, but still wasn't an elite unit by any stretch. I remember the first time watching him was that TCU game 2 years ago. The first, drive down the field, I was like, holy crap, this dude throws lasers. And he was just dropping kind of wherever he wanted all over the field. So, in terms of, a quarterback, I'm interested to see if you agree with this, like a quarterback out of this entire class where it's like, all right, we're just going out there to play 7-on-7. You just need to basically be accurate. You don't have to worry about pass rush. You don't have to worry about mobility or anything. Would Sanders be your guy out of this draft?
It probably would be, honestly. That his accuracy and his ball placement is elite when he doesn't have any type of pressure in his face. Like we've seen that this year, like you said, TCU game, but we've seen him with a clean pocket deliver some crazy throws. Like you said, he had Travis Hunter, he had Horn to throw to, but he delivered in those moments. And some of the balls that he placed are in crazy windows that you would look at and you're like, why are you throwing it? And then you see it and it's right on the numbers. But like you said, he needs that clean pocket to do so. Once he escapes that pocket, he kind of tends to get, wayward and here and there, stuff like that. But he's been reliable when the game's on the line, and he can withstand some hits. But at the same time, it's hard when, like you said, seeing ghosts. And sometimes when there's nothing even there, he'll act like there is something there and he'll force something. So getting that timing and he has natural playmaking ability, which really helps that his timing has been so off.
I see your comparison for him here is Geno Smith, and it kind of goes to the conversation with me where it's like, how much do you actually take player comps into consideration? Because it's like, all right, if I'm considering taking Shador Sanders in the top 10 and I'm getting Geno Smith, basically, why the hell would I do that? Geno Smith is a fine player, but he's been a starter pretty much as long as he's been a backup in the league. He's gotten a extended chance here in Seattle, but I would never consider taking him as a top 10 pick in an NFL draft. Like if I was a redraft of any year recently, like I think he's a fine player, but why would I take Shedeur Sanders that high? Does that kind of go into your mindset as well? It's like he doesn't seem even like a round one type player for me.
Yeah, I would say maybe like the late end round one, but like a Geno Smith, I would not be taking him in the top 10. You know what I mean? I don't think he is really the quarterback to change an offensive system. Like you said, or like I said earlier, there's defensive players, there's offensive line, and this defensive line class is crazy. Like I would prefer that and have a cornerstone defensive line rather than risky quarterback, and you don't know really what you're getting into because we've seen quarterbacks have good talent in college and then come into a terrible system and not be able to produce. So you put a quarterback with the talent that he really has in a terrible system, he's not going to succeed. So I think like the Geno Smith comp. Now I don't know that isn't really the player comparisons are more just their play style, not really how their career is
Mhm.
going to play out.
Yeah.
Like I see him and I see a little bit of how Geno slings it. You know what I mean? But I don't really think the career longevity is going to be the same, honestly. But I would he like I said earlier, this his timing is everything. His timing, if he can get on time with his offensive system, his routes, his O line, I think he could be a sustainable NFL quarterback.
Yeah, when you look at the top 10 picks in the NFL draft this year, you got the Titans at 1, Browns at 2, Giants at 3, Patriots at 4, Jags at 5, Raiders 6, Jets 7, Panthers 8, New Orleans 9, Chicago 10. So you can look at Titans, Cleveland, Giants, Raiders, Jets, Saints. I think you can look at 6 teams that could potentially consider a quarterback there in the top 10, like especially now that Kellen Moore is down in New Orleans. Like, does he want to get his own guy at quarterback? Las Vegas brings in a new coach and GM. Do they want to get their guy at quarterback? The Giants, Brian Dable and Joe Shane probably coaching and drafting for their job this year. Are they going to trust a rookie quarterback with that spot? Like, there's a lot of quarterback needing teams, and whether one of Shador or Cam Ward, I'll guarantee goes in the top 10, even though if they don't deserve it. We see it all the time in the NFL draft that these teams reach for these quarterbacks. But there's a third guy that's been kind of creeping into the picture where it's maybe he's even the second quarterback. I haven't heard necessarily the first, but my guy from Ole Miss the past couple of years, Jackson Dart, has been getting a lot of love recently. Senior, 6'2", 225, 2024 stats, 4,200 passing yards, 29 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 69.3% completion percentage, 495 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. By far more of a runner than both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. He uses his legs a lot better. And I think one thing that we'll get to, one of the guys on our list is Will Howard, 6'4", 235. But all these other guys, 6'3", 6'2", 6'2", 6'2", 6'2", 6'2". Not many ideal like Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, 6'5", 6'6" quarterbacks in this class. A lot of more kind of undersized guys. And I guess that also kind of goes into the, why maybe this isn't viewed as such a great quarterback class, not ideal size, not ideal talent. But what are your thoughts on Jackson Dart and the potential of him rising into a potential first-round player himself?
I'm a big fan of Dart. The last 2 seasons, I've bet him the Heisman. Hasn't really worked out, but I think he is a player that can produce. He's very accurate, and he's a good athlete too. Looks composed a lot of times, calm in the pocket. Always, his eyes are always downfield, so he's always looking to sling it. Good athlete, as I said. Very good in a well-protected pocket, as we touched on earlier. Most quarterbacks will be good in a well-protected pocket. Goes through his progressions well. He doesn't sit on that first read. If his first read isn't there, he'll move on to the next and make a good decision. Good accuracy in those short level throws. Can definitely improve on the deep ball. He has the arm strength, but the accuracy isn't really always there. His footwork and mechanics can sometimes get off kilter. He'll tend to like just muscle throws out there, which tends to, he needs to use more effort than he really has to. Can learn to throw his receivers more open. Those anticipation throws, I think he can work on, but the production's been there. He has 8 games over 300 yards, 4 games with 4+ passing touchdowns. Just had 29 passing touchdowns and only 6 picks. so he doesn't really turn the ball over. We've seen a couple head scratching plays like in that last game against, I think it was Florida. Had a couple bad passes that you're like, well, what are you doing? Had 1,500 rushing yards at Ole Miss, so 12 touchdowns in 3 seasons. He can produce on the run too, use his legs. So I think he'll be able to produce in the NFL. Maybe obviously as a backup. I think a couple years down the line we might see him become a starter.
All right, I might get bashed for this one, and I'm not saying this is a direct comp, but having watched him closely over the past few years and watching Jalen Hurts, develop at an early stage, I feel like their play style is like kind of similar, where it's like they're very good athletes, they are talented throwers, but they also show a kind of a need for a lot of growth in throwing. Like Jalen coming into the league is a much different player than he is right now, obviously being a Super Bowl MVP. But like Dart, when you think of Dart, and when I think of Hurts, I don't think it's just like a pure runner. Like coming out of college, like I thought of Lamar as more of a runner. When you think of running quarterbacks, more so like a Mike Vick, a Cam Newton, but Jalen Hurts and Jackson Dart are two guys I think like can run if they need to, but also are good in design runs, like where they're not looking to necessarily run first. And you look at even just Jackson Dart's game logs, like you talked about his rushing production, his numbers are down, obviously because sacks get involved there, but like 12 carries, 13 carries, 14 carries, 10 carries, 15 carries, 13 carries. This is a guy that ran the ball 124 times this year. Like his number gets called and he's able to use his legs. So like a plus athlete. As I said, I think a much better athlete than both Shador and Cam Ward. And I think that's something too that can get him on the field a little bit at the beginning. Kind of interested to hear your thoughts on that. And also like coming out of the Lane Kiffin system, the Ole Miss system, the last guy we saw in the NFL draft come out of that is Matt Corral, and he's already out of the league, I believe, like playing in the
Yeah. I think I lost you there, Rye. But going on Jackson Dart, I completely agree with you with the athleticism. I mean, I think he's an athletic, composed quarterback. Like you said with Hurts, he has a lot more room to grow. He's very productive in the 3 years, had over 10,000 yards, 72 passing touchdowns, only 22 picks in 3 seasons. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think he can be a very developmental low end starter. And like you said with Hurts, he's going to have to grow in a lot of different ways. But I think he's able to do it being in that Lane Kiffin system. Even though the last one coming out was Matt Corral, I think he can definitely produce as a sustainable backup.
Yeah, he's a guy that has been talked about, I think, the most out of the quarterback group as a riser so far. And wouldn't be surprised if he's one of those guys that goes in between like 20 and 32, maybe even one of the teams with like an older quarterback and they look to take a developmental type of player. All right, we go on to another guy that screams developmental type of player. When he was at his best this year, he was one of the best players in all of college football. He was the favorite for the Heisman Trophy at one point. You saw when he looked at his best against Georgia, and then you saw a game like against Michigan in their bowl game, the downfalls of him. And that's Jalen Milroe, quarterback out of Alabama, junior, 6'2", 225 pounds, definitely the best athlete that we've talked about, probably maybe the best athlete on the offensive side of the ball, not named Travis Hunter. I think we could argue like he's another guy that maybe one day he does get just shifted into a running back, because I think it was Kirby said it after the Georgia Alabama game. They basically said like their quarterback is just a running back that can throw, and it's a big advantage to them. Jalen Milroe this year, only 2,800 passing yards, 16 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 64.3% completion percentage. I think that's the thing he's got to work on the most if he's going to be an NFL quarterback. But as we talked about with a lot of the other quarterbacks, you got to remember rushing yards take a hit with sacks. He still found a way to 726 rushing yards and 20 rushing touchdowns this year. So a gifted athlete, a gifted runner, at times a gifted thrower. He's got a gifted arm, but certainly has some tools to work with, but things he needs to work on as well. What are your thoughts on Jalen Milroe?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. He's a great athlete, very good out of the pocket with a runner. He lacks a lot of accuracy and decision making. He's got a strong arm, great speed, but I agree with you. If he doesn't really make it as a starter, I find it hard for GMs and coaches to look at him and not try to involve him in like package plays like a Malik Willis. Like you said, he had 32 or 20 rushing touchdowns this year. The last 2 seasons, he's or total for 71 touchdowns, and 32 of them have been rushing touchdowns. So he is a very good runner, but that arm is just such a question mark. He's got great strength, high velocity, but no accuracy. He's got a weird throwing motion too. It's kind of like I feel like a shortstop, like it's a short and sweet throwing motion, quick trigger. He's most of his production has been inside of a I keep talking about this, but a well protected pocket. And with him, he tends to bail out a lot and early when he doesn't have to, but at the same time, he stays in there too long and takes sacks that he doesn't have to. So I think he's more of a project. He's more of a package player. I don't think he really will develop his arm that much. And if he does, good for him. But I really don't see much more of a Malik Willis type of player in Jalen Milroe.
And Malik Willis this year, like he played pretty well in spurts
Yeah.
when he was obviously called upon in Tennessee, struggled, but obviously the surrounding situation wasn't that great. If Jalen Milroe, like I think if you put him on the Eagles, and I would say have McKee or excuse me, Kenny Pickett back up Jalen again this year. But just work with Malik Willis, work with Jalen Milroe and develop him. Like that's a nice kind of long-term backup there for Jalen Hurts, especially with not really having to change the offense much. Like obviously there's going to need to be some more emphasis on the run, I think, when Jalen Milroe is in the game. But he's a guy that he's got stuff that you can't teach. And when you've been a team like Philadelphia that's been so good on hitting on draft picks, knock on wood, in recent years, you can take some swings on guys like this. And I don't think they think Kenny Pickett's necessarily the long-term backup. Tanner McKee's a guy too, as well. If he goes out and plays well in the preseason, I could see him being a guy that other teams are interested in to have a situation where he could potentially go play more. So Jalen Milroe is a guy that, obviously you have to get him for the right price, like a fourth or the fifth round, maybe at this stage of the game. But a guy that I would look at, even if I was like Washington, Buffalo, Baltimore, teams with guys that are mobile quarterbacks, take a risk on some high talent here and look to develop them. What are your thoughts kind of on that?
Yeah, that would be cool to see him back up Lamar or something, or Josh Allen in like a run package system like that. With those two elite athletes at quarterback, that would be fun to see them or see him in a system like that. But if he really has to use his arm, I don't see him being successful unless he really does get that development in a good system. And that is very much in play. Like he could easily develop a more accurate arm, putting in those reps. And if he does, that could be a very a dangerous piece in an offense. If he could develop that arm and he has the athleticism that he does, having that in your quarterback room would be scary.
And a lot of the same things were said about Jalen Hurts coming out.
Yep.
Like, he's an athlete. I think Jalen Milroe is probably a better athlete, definitely faster, a more gifted runner. But a lot of people didn't believe Jalen was an NFL thrower. Even, heck, a year going into the Super Bowl year, the first Super Bowl year, like people were still very critical. If you put in the work, Jalen showed the ability that you can get better, and Milroe's got the talent. So he's a guy that I would definitely consider taking a chance on, and a high ceiling, kind of low floor type of player, but still a player that I think worst comes worst, you'd be able to find ways to get the ball in his hands and make some plays at the end of the day if he completely flames out as a quarterback. Next guy is a guy that's been a SEC starter, has gone up head-to-head against Jalen Milroe before. That's Quinn Ewers at Texas, another player that had a chance to go back this year. Both Milroe and Ewers, I think, would have benefited from another year. Ewers probably wasn't going to get to play at Texas this year, but he would have plenty of other suitors out on the open market. 6'2", 210 pounds, the former number one overall recruit coming out of high school. He was at one point 24/7 Sports, and I don't know if he still is or if Arch overtook him for that, but the number one recruit that they ever had in their system, like the perfect prospect. 0.9999 repeating on, because I don't think they give out 100. But Quinn Ewers was at one point the highest rated recruit ever coming out of high school. This past year at Texas, he throws for 3,400 yards, 31 passing touchdowns, missed some time as well with some injuries, 12 interceptions, 65.8% completion percentage, 2 rushing touchdowns. Not much of a runner for sure, but a guy that has over 3 years starting at Texas missed a handful of time. And I think injuries are one of the biggest concerns in his game. What do you think of Quinn Ewers, Nick?
Yeah, I think he's shown a lot of flashes of being a very good quarterback, especially with the experience in the SEC. Obviously, been a five-star recruit, then transferred over. He has put up over 9,000 passing yards, 68 touchdowns, and added on 8 rushing touchdowns. I think he's got great mechanics, great footwork, nice touch. I think his problem, like you said, is the injuries and the inconsistencies. He's has a little bit too much. He forces it a little bit too much, but I think he has good pocket presence, good mobility in the pocket, can evade some pressure. I know we didn't see that against Jack Sawyer to end that game, but at the end of the day, I think he still has. He's an experienced quarterback that has seen a lot, has played in a lot of big games. I think he can be a very serviceable quarterback in a nice system. I think he could probably be like that Sam Howell type of player, like come in and if he needs to lead a team, I think he can be able to do it. I don't know if he'll be able to become that full-time starter, but I think he has the ability to develop into that.
Yeah, one of the things with quarterbacks in recent drafts, it's like the guys that have limited college experience and they've been thrown kind of into the fire right away in the NFL have struggled and have found their way kind of out of the league. When you look at a guy like Quinn Ewers, he has 3 years pretty much full starting in the SEC for one, and in the Big 12 for two. And then also he had that 1 year at Ohio State where he was around some great quarterbacks as well. So this is a guy, as you said, has seen a lot. I really like that Sam Howell kind of comparison where he can go out there and he can have some really good games, but then as well he can have some head scratchers. The injuries is the biggest concern for me. Like, does that get any better going to the NFL? I don't think so. I mean, it's a lot of them have been contact injuries, whether it's been like shoulders. He had an ankle, I believe, this year. A lot of them have just been, it could have been like weight type of stuff where he just wasn't able to withstand, excuse me, the contact and the injuries. So something that I think his teams are certainly going to be keeping a close eye on with him more than a lot of these prospects. The injury history, but you got to look at the experience. I think he's got a lot of that on his side. He won a lot of games at Texas. I think you could say he kind of helped really bring that Texas program back.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like you said, the experience is a big thing. Like going into the NFL and not having the experience or the play time or the time in those critical games where meaningful games, like you got to be able to have those games under your belt to be able to succeed in the NFL, especially nowadays with how these offenses are run. I think you got to have that experience, and he really does. So I think he has the opportunity, as I mean everyone does, to develop into that full-time backup role that, like you said, can come into a game, can play maybe 3 games straight if you want, and then that fourth game I'll have that bottom out. You know what I mean? But I think at the same time he's no more than really that at the next level.
All right, I got two more I want to hit on, and then maybe we'll have time for one more potentially at the end. But this guy led the country in passing this year out of the ACC, was a former Ohio State player, transferred just to Syracuse for 1 year, and I think he made the most of his opportunity this year, and that's Kyle McCord. 6'3", 220 pounds, 4,779 passing yards this year, which led the country, 34 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions. I believe 4 of those came in one game, 2 against Pitt. That was by far his worst game of the season. Other than that, he was an awesome player this year. That was a really fun Syracuse team to watch. They really kind of unleashed him, and he had an awesome year. 66% completion percentage, 3 rushing touchdowns. Kind of got pushed out the door last year at Ohio State, but as I said, made the most of his opportunity at Syracuse this year. And I've seen a few things like post like the Shrine Bowl that his name's a guy that's been rising as well.
Yeah, I mean, he had a insanely productive year this year. Like you said, led the nation in passing yards with just over 4,700, added on 34 passing touchdowns. He had 12 of his 13 games through for over 320 yards. So he slings it. He's a very smooth and like technically sound, fundamental nice touch type of quarterback, good accuracy in those tight spaces. He knows when to use that touch and then velocity. I think he can. He's not the most athletic or mobile, but I feel like he is able to do so if he really wants to or if he really has to. He throws with that good anticipation, leads his receivers open. We saw that a lot at Syracuse. Good decision maker. Once he's under pressure, though, that pocket starts collapsing, fundamentals start getting out of whack, gets flustered, can fade off his back foot a lot that I've seen, then loses that velocity, loses that power. I think he can deliver as a solid NFL back or at backup. But like you said, I kind of see some similarities with him and Ewers with that Sam Howell comparison. If he can come in, if a quarterback has an injury, lead them for a few games, then kind of dies out. Teams start to, know his tendencies. But I think with the production that he put up at Syracuse, he'll be able to sneak in this maybe top 3 rounds, maybe even sneak into 2.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear from you. Why do you think, I mean, other than the competition being worse in the ACC than the Big Ten, why do you think he had such a more better year at Syracuse this year than Ohio State, considering all the weapons he had around him there?
Yeah, I was gonna say with the weapons that he has at a upper echelon school like Ohio State, and then compared to Syracuse, I guess maybe I'm gonna look at the stats now. Did he throw a lot more? Did he have a lot more attempts? I'm not sure, but either way, I think the production is very eye-opening because at a school like Ohio State, you should be putting up those good numbers, those productive numbers. But I mean, I don't really know. I think like in a system like Syracuse, you don't really expect to put up numbers like this, but
Yeah.
he went out there and did it. So I think that kind of shows his leadership, shows his role in a locker room, shows that he can be able to lead a team. So I think teams in the NFL, GMs, head guys will see that and be like, okay, I kind of want that in my system.
Yeah, I feel like Ohio State, I mean, they kind of did it with Will Howard throughout part of the season, but it was basically like, don't ruin the game for us. We have so much talent around you.
Right.
They didn't really like unleash them, and I think we saw this year go to the ACC, obviously with and with less talent around him. Syracuse kind of had to unleash him more, and he certainly made the most of his opportunity because I don't think he was a guy even going into the season really considered on draft boards. But this is also another player. He was a top 50 recruit coming out of high school, a crazy high school career at St. Joe's Prep. So we'll see what happens with Kyle McCord. He's a guy that I'm rooting for because I think he got, raw deal there at Ohio State, and he had a really nice bounce back at Syracuse this year. All right, last guy we just talked about, a former Ohio State quarterback. We will touch on now the Ohio State quarterback from this past year who had a great playoffs. I think he made himself a lot of money in the playoffs. Another guy that, maybe it was like a 6th, 7th round project type of consideration. I think this year or after that playoff run, he's more of a 4th round, 5th round type guy that's going to get, a chance to compete for maybe a backup spot as soon as this year. And I think he's a good enough athlete where you can use him in some like power run type situations, see like what Taysom Hill has done with the Saints, things like that. That's Will Howard, 6'4", 235 pounds, Ohio State quarterback, national champion, transfer from Kansas State, 4,010 passing yards, 35 passing touchdowns. Was not, I guess, impressed, but I was surprised to see this number was this high. 73.1% completion percentage, was very accurate. 10 interceptions. He had some kind of head-scratching interceptions this year. I think that is really what held the Ohio State team back during the regular season, but 226 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns as well. I don't think he's as quick as he once was. He might be a little bit bulkier, but he was much more of a runner at Kansas State. They made him into a better passer at Ohio State. But what are your thoughts on Will Howard, and does he have a chance to stick around in the league too?
Yeah, I think he does. He's got that prototypical NFL size. It's, like you said, 6'4", 235. Great. He's a good athlete for his size. He used his legs a lot more at Kansas State, like you said already. I think he can extend plays that really you see that aren't open, and he can evade a lot. It does help when you have the offensive line of Ohio State, even though they battled some injuries. He knows when to use that touch, the velocity. He is very accurate. He has those developmental traits that you can see an NFL quarterback coach can develop it, and a skill set and continue his growth. I think he can improve on the turnovers. The last 2 seasons, he had 20 picks combined, 10 in each. I think he can limit that. He's a bit of an older prospect. I think he'll be like 24 by the time the season turns or starts. And his nothing really pops out of like elite about him. He's just very, above average and all, or well-rounded throughout. I think he's more athletic Mason Rudolph, if that is a good comparison. I don't know. I don't think his career will end up like that. I think he'll be a little better than him. But if you get him in the right system, I think he can very well develop into, I don't know, that QB1, but I think he'll be able to fight for that spot.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever see him being a starter, but I do see him as kind of a guy that could go in there and start you 2 to 3 games, and you don't really feel like it's a completely massive drop off. Obviously, it depends on who your starter is, but he's nowhere near Josh Allen and that type of play, that level of a player, but like similar styles at times where you can run him. He does have the ability to make some throws. Like, could he be kind of a long-term backup there in Buffalo? I could see that maybe being a fit. We'll get into team fits, team needs and stuff a lot more as we go. Just wanted this to be kind of a crash course on some of these top quarterback prospects, even though they're not really considered great for this year. We got one question in the chat. It's a running back question. Huge fan of the show, already a sub. Is Genty really all that? People comparing him to Marshawn Lynch. Is he a better prospect than Bijan? Our next episode will be running back, so a little kind of teaser here.
Yeah, I mean, Marshawn is a big comparison. Marshawn's one of my favorite running backs ever, so I think he's kind of got that bully ball play style like him. He can be versatile too out of the backfield, which Marshawn Lynch wasn't really all that. I mean, I guess he could be, but Genty's way more of that pass catcher. They're both insanely hard to tackle. Their contact balance is absurd. You can just lay right into him and he'll still bounce off. I kind of lean towards like a Maurice Jones-Drew for Ash and Jenny. That smaller bowling ball, like you need 4 guys to bring him down. Very patient. He's smart. He lets his blocks set up. Very fluid, smooth athlete. I think he's a good pass blocker. I think he could probably improve on that, but the size, he's 5'9", 215. He's not going to be out there blocking edge rushers. So I don't dislike the Marshawn Lynch just because I have Marshawn Lynch on another pedestal, but I think Maurice Jones-Drew is more of like the comparison for me.
All right, well, that'll wrap it up with the quarterback episode, as we talked about not the greatest class, but a little kind of teaser there into the running back episode, which I think people are a lot higher on. Obviously, Ash and Genty, and then I think this is one that we could see like 3 to 4 to maybe even 5 running backs going in the first kind of top 60 to 75 picks. Seems like that's the kind of consensus out there right now. But any last second comments on the quarterbacks, Nick?
No, I think we kind of talked on it all. That's really it's not the greatest class. I don't think it's as bad as the 22 class. 22 class was brutal. Kenny Pickett, the first one off the board, so I don't really think it's that bad. But I think we touched on it all, and I can't wait to get to the running backs next week.
All right, well, that will do it for Bending the Edge, episode 1. Got quarterbacks this week. Running backs will go to pass catchers the following week, cutting on the receivers and the tight end. Move on to some offensive linemen, hit all the defensive stuff, and we'll get a little bit more specific in some mock drafts as we go. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in here to Fox Sports The Gambler. If you're watching on YouTube, please drop a like, drop a subscribe, and we'll talk to you next week here at Bending the Edge.